Number 10, his true origins. It's gotta be a tough time to find out your parents aren't even your real parents. It happens quite often in these comics, but Loki was raised in the Odinson household, and he felt like he belonged there at least. Well, mostly. I mean, sure, Thor was the favorite brother and all, but he truly thought Odin and Frigga were his parents. So when Loki came into contact with the Casket of Ancient Winters, he actually thought he was cursed. Now, the Casket of Ancient Winters was safely stored in Odin's vault at this time, and we see it for the first time in the comics in Thor issue 346. And it made it to the big screen in 2011 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the Casket of Ancient Winters is a relic that doubled down as a deadly weapon, belonging originally to the Frost Giants. So Loki felt this without even knowing his true heritage, and he still felt this power, and it has the ability to unleash the fury of 1,000 killing winters. So you open this thing and it's trouble. You better be ready for quite a rush. It took all of Heimdall's strength to just break through this ice when Loki used it against him later on in Thor 1. Coming from a guy who lives in Canada, it doesn't look too bad. Wear some layers, grab a coffee, you'll be fine. And before we continue on with this Loki list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it looks just like that, maybe a little less nice. That would be great for our studio. It really does help us out quite a bit, especially while we're working from home for this last little chunk. It really does go a long way for us. So thank you so much for your patience and support. Let's get right back into this video. Number 9, rejected at birth. Before the monologues and ruling, Loki was just a kid born into royalty. He made his first comic book appearance in Venus, issue 6, and in the Silver Age he entered with Journey into Mystery, issue 85. His father was King Laufey, leader of the giants of Jotunheim, and Loki was born not a frost giant, but rather he was pretty petite. He was small and frail, so much so that his parents were actually kind of embarrassed to call him family. He wasn't even allowed to play with the other giants. Poor Loki, from birth he's had a rough go. But it only gets worse. Number 8, stuck in a tree. Now I know that doesn't sound very frightening off the bat, but when it comes to Asgardian magic, this can be quite daunting. In Journey into Mystery issue 85, the first time we see Loki on the pages, before he even gets up to anything crazy in the comics, he was condemned by the gods to be trapped in a tree. In a tree! He's to remain there until somebody sheds a tear for him. Now, Loki, obviously, no one's gonna be crying over him. He was kind of the worst, but someone did cry. Someone did shed one tear for Loki. Might be a little bit different than you think. So he's been in this tree for ages now, but slowly and surely he's able to control the tree. And I don't mean like the trees from Wizard of Oz either, like not gonna huck apples at Odin. He can just manipulate the tree in small ways. So when Heimdall's passing that tree, he commands the tree to shed a leaf, and the timing was so perfect. The leaf just fell and then poked him right in his eye, causing, of course, a tear to fall after. And voila, we see Loki emerge from this tree and just run for it, just run for the hills. And his first plan of attack was to seek revenge on the one responsible for his tree time, Brother Thor. Number 7, Hulk smashed. When Loki tried to tame the Hulk in the first Avengers movie, he got ragdoll into cement in the Avengers Tower. It was kind of a funny moment for theaters, especially that little squeak that Tom Hiddleston lets out when he's lying there. It's so funny, it's great. Well, according to E. Paul Zare, who has a PhD in neuroscience, and Dr. Kirk McGee from the QEII Health Sciences Center, Loki would have been kind of screwed. He would have been in a lot of pain here. Due to the whip-like actions of the Hulk swinging him, Loki would apparently have a crushed skull, fractured vertebrae from the cervical or neck region all the way down to the lower back, broken ribs, dislocated hips, crushed tibia and fibula, and crushed metatarsal ankle bones. Loki would also suffer internal damage as well, like punctured lungs, a ruptured septum in the heart, a lacerated liver, ruptured spleen, kidney damage, and a ruptured bladder. Now, I get that he's part of the whole God Squad, but he's got to feel at least a few of these. And we have proof that he did feel those, because in Thor Ragnarok, when Thor gets ragdolled in a similar fashion, Loki gets up excitedly and says, "That's how it feels." So you can tell he's been thinking about this a bit. Number 6, solitary confinement. So after the events of the original Avengers movie, when Loki didn't steal the cosmic cube and break the timeline, he was actually sent back up to Asgard to do some time. Now, in usual fashion, he attended a hearing where he was sentenced to life in the Asgardian dungeons. Now, the only reason he was still alive in the first place is actually because of his mother, his adoptive mother, Frigga. The trial was nuts. Loki got absolutely blasted. He was roasted. He was told his birthright was to die as a child, cast out on a frozen rock. So when he got cozy in confinement, his mother came in to say some last words to the fallen son. She was calm. She shared concern about his holding cell. It was a beautiful moment where you could tell Loki wasn't so evil after all. He wasn't manipulated from the cosmic cube anymore. He cared for his mother through all of this, and when he went out to touch her hand one last time, it ended up just being magic. She wasn't actually there. Now, funny enough, in a deleted scene, this moment is even more heartbreaking. The scene showed the two talking as they did in the final cut of Thor the Dark World, but Frigga told Loki that a true king admits his faults. And then Loki responds with, "Well, Odin's not my real father, so you're not my real mother." Number 5, cursed advice. Algrim the Strong was a lieutenant of the Dark Elves leader Malekith, and he was serving his master Malekith, you know, the MCU's best villain, Malekith, him. Algrim was locked up with Loki at the same time in those dungeons. He actually sacrificed his life to become the last of the cursed. Much like Loki in Avengers 1, he too got locked up with bigger intentions. So once he transformed using the Curse Stone and he punched his way out of the dungeons, he debated setting Loki free, but again, he was frail and small, so he's like, no. Walking away, Loki tipped him off to the best escape route to the Asgardian shield generator. And after Curse demolishes that, the other Dark Elves were able to invade Asgard, and then Curse met up with Malekith, and after failing to retrieve the Aether, Curse stabbed Frigga in the back with her own sword. To think Loki helped this guy out, that's crazy. He's like, hey, try those stairs, you get there faster. And then now his mom's dead. Way to go, Loki. This was after he chose not to free Loki as well, so Loki just gave the advice just cuz. Number 4, eaten by his father. Yeah, this one's, oof. In War of the Realms, the Dark Elf Malekith returns from imprisonment, starts a war in his homeworld of Svartalheim, and was crowned a king. The next step was to assemble the League of Allies from across the 10 realms, forming the Dark Council. Now among those was King Laufey and Loki. Now a family discussion breaks out. Laufey confesses to Loki that he's the worst thing to ever come from his loins. Nice use of the word loins there, good stuff. And he referred to him as his one great shame. As if the roast wasn't hard enough, he proceeds to eat Loki with a very loud crunch to go along with the visuals. Yum. Number 3, beaten to death. In the 2004 Loki series, it picks up with Loki claiming leadership of Asgard. It's a dream come true this time around. He has the throne officially, but the throne life isn't what he expected, really. Those who helped Loki become a king now want him to continue and fulfill his promises. So Loki would now go to his prisoners, Thor and Lady Sif, for some ruling advice, you know, one of those. It's like when somebody becomes manager and they don't know how to manage, so they're like, how do I do this? And you're like, I'm making $12, man, I don't know, you gotta figure this one out. After some events, it's decided that Thor will be beheaded the next day at dawn. But in typical Loki fashion, he went against fate and opted not to follow through last minute. He spared his brother and freed him, but Hela was actually revealed to be another version of Loki, just used as an illusion to get Thor killed. So when Thor was free, he was like, you know what, I'm just gonna finish this myself. And he beat Loki to death. It was brutal. Number 2, killed by Thanos. Yeah, we gotta mention this one. I'd say it's a pretty bad day. The final scenes of Thor Ragnarok, we find Thor and Loki aboard the new ship, the new Asgard, after the old one got blown to smithereens. Loki looks at Thor and tells him how much he reminds him of Odin. It's a very sweet moment between the brothers. Finally, they're close and they're ready to do some good. Then all of a sudden, this big ship approaches and audience knew who it was right off the bat. Loki met his fate before the title card even appeared in Avengers Infinity War. He tried to go out like a hero and he put his tricks to use, but Thanos saw it coming. And the crack we hear in Loki's neck is, I still hear it in my head. No resurrections this time, Thanos says, before dropping his lifeless blue body on the floor of the ship. But right before Loki gets the chokey, he does say something to Thor that stuck with him and fans. He assures them that the sun will shine on them again. So I'm hoping that Loki comes out of this alive somehow. I think the Disney show is gonna bring him back in a way like they did with Vision. It's possible. And finally, number 1, TVA trouble. Loki is quick on his feet. Even when he was in the midst of being detained after Avengers 1, he still got his hands on the Tesseract for 2 seconds in Endgame, and poof, now he was gone, disrupting all these timelines. Now this probably felt good in the moment. He's like, yes, the Cosmic Cube, here we go, time to make a getaway. But luckily for us, the Time Variance Authority was waiting for him. He gets arrested by them, his clothes get ripped off, he is now a prisoner of the TVA. Now the TVA is the Time Variance Authority. It's an organization that protects timelines, and Owen Wilson is his character named Agent Mobius, and he explains to Loki that they need him to restore the timelines. Now this is going to be a fun series. I've actually been looking forward to this, I think the most since all of these shows were announced, right beside WandaVision. I'm like, it's going to be good. The fact that this is 2012 Loki again is just the icing on the timeline cake. I'm excited to see more of this character arc on screen because we missed like 4 years from when he became a king at the end of Thor 2, and then we cut to Thor Ragnarok and it was like a comedy buddy cop movie. Like I want to see that dark stuff in between. I want to see that dark Loki still. I want to see more monologues, more Mule and Quim comments, that kind of stuff. Now he's gonna be DB Cooper? Let's go, sign me up.
Number 10, United Villains. It almost felt like Loki was trying to make up for doing something really good for the heroes in the world and for, causing a bunch of harmful things for himself when he brought the Avengers together with this plot. During the Acts of Vengeance crossover, Loki, under the guise of a businessman, used his skills as a master manipulator to bring together the Prime Movers, a very contradictory team of powerful villains who all hated the Avengers and heroes in general, and sought to destroy them by attacking them with less conventional villains. The team was made up of Dr. Doom, Kingpin, Mandarin, Wizard, Magneto, and Red Skull, and their plan was actually pretty solid. It sounds like it wouldn't work, but it actually worked pretty well. However, even Loki couldn't manage to keep the group together, and they ended up breaking up, mostly due to everyone's mutual hatred of Red Skull. Which, yeah, I get it. Also, when you put Magneto and Red Skull on a team together, I mean, what do you expect to happen? They're obviously gonna break up. It's a terrible match. Number 9 formed the Avengers. If you thought Nick Fury brought the Avengers together, then you might be surprised to hear this. In the comics, however, it was not Fury's plot that brought all of Earth's mightiest heroes together, but Loki's. Granted, Loki hadn't planned on doing so, and in the end it actually resulted in way more trouble for him and many other villains in the Marvel-verse besides than he could have ever imagined. Loki was the first villain the team would come up against in Avengers issue number 1, and the villain who would unite them together, much like in the MCU actually, but with less scepters and invasions and with more tricks and illusions and like magic. Loki tricked the Hulk into destroying a train track, thereby endangering human lives. And although no one was hurt because the Hulk actually saved everyone from his own breaking of the train track, the people still saw the Hulk as a monster, and it was this event that brought the Avengers together. In the end, it was revealed that Loki was behind all of it, and the Avengers ended up uniting to defeat him. So yeah, this was one of the worst things Loki kinda did to himself even. That's super tricksy. Number 8. Thor croaks. Are we going to talk about the frog thing? You bet we're gonna talk about the frog thing, because you know, this is a part 1, so we gotta talk about it. One of the most bizarre and yet great schemes Loki has committed to date was when he devised to have Thor turn into a frog in order to get his do-good brother out of the way so that he might rule Asgard in his place. Not only is this awful because, you know, turning your brother into a frog is never a nice thing to do, but we aren't just talking about anyone here. This is Thor. The transformation was even worse for the god of thunder, who often prides himself on his prowess and strength as a warrior. As a frog, he was robbed of his natural sense of courage and his eagerness for battle initially, and as Frog Thor, he had to rediscover this before eventually, of course, being returned to his standard form and getting revenge back on Loki, because that's how this always goes, unless we're in like an alternate Earth. Number 7 was defeated? But how can this be the worst? Well, because it put Loki in a position of great power, and he would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for his meddling brother Thor. Some theorize that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Loki actually allowed himself to be defeated by the Avengers in that first film. The whole invading Earth wasn't actually something he wanted or needed, but it was actually all part of a grander scheme to get caught and then be put in exactly the place he needed and in fact wanted to be in order for him to later take over Asgard. Of course, we don't know if this is true or if he was really the puppet in an even greater scheme where Thanos was the master the whole time, which does kind of sound more likely, but I like to think that almost everything has been part of Loki's plan, including any deaths he's seemingly suffered, because he's just a master manipulator. Also, all these deaths are all fake, and I don't believe any of them. I see you, Loki. Even that last one. We got that last one, everyone was like, oh, he's definitely dead, and I was like, he'll be back. I don't believe it. And he is back now. Granted, it's a different version of him, but still, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna say, don't believe any of it. Don't believe any deaths. They're all lies. Number 6, impersonated Scarlet Witch. And while impersonating her, also kinda made out with Clint Barton, who was Ronin at the time. In fact, this is one of the things that tipped the heroes off to her true identity, because apparently Clint has some kind of magical kissing power. Wait a minute, that's not Scarlet Witch. I would know her kiss anywhere. Since when did Clint and Wanda make out enough for him to be able to identify her kiss instantly? Also, how different are Loki's and Wanda's kissing styles? I want to know. Like, are they radically different? Are they a little different? What level are we talking about here? Loki's plan here, of course, was to impersonate Wanda so he could help create his own team of Avengers, which he would then use against Norman Osborn. Perhaps he was resentful because he wasn't invited to Osborn's Dark Avengers? How rude. Well, multiple people were suspicious that it wasn't Wanda. Eventually, Loki's illusion was broken fully by Wiccan, Wanda's reincarnated, formerly self-constructed son. I hope that makes sense to you. That's what he is. I don't know. Before we move on to the next spot, it's time to do that thing. You know that thing where you click that like button if you are liking this video. Yeah, do the thing. Number 5. Betrayed Thor. Was anyone surprised? No, not even Thor was surprised on this one, but it didn't make it any less awful. This moment comes to us from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In Thor Ragnarok, after Loki and Thor finally seem to be willing to put the past behind them and work together for once to save Asgard, Loki decides to betray his brother yet again. He plans to alert the authorities and have Thor captured in exchange for a hefty reward, meaning that Thor would be likely eternally imprisoned and trapped on Sakaar, which would also leave Asgard eternally doomed with Hela in charge. Easier to let it burn, Loki says, before Thor reveals he was expecting the betrayal and tases him remotely. Number 4. Tried to fool the X-Men and almost succeeded. During the 80s, Alpha Flight and X-Men had a team-up 2-part story, which of course started with both teams fighting one another, but all due to a greater misunderstanding. And yeah, actually Alpha Flight during the 80s was a big thing. It was huge. We don't talk about Alpha Flight much anymore, but they were a big deal back then. Loki was up to some sneaky business here where he was trying to convince the northern gods that he was, trying to help mortals, that he was a good guy, when really he was trying to create chaos. Surprise, surprise. He had a fire fountain at his disposal, which not only sounds super flashy, but also granted magical clothing and cool powers to mortals, as well as I believe eternal life. The X-Men ended up in the city containing the fire fountain after their plane went down and crash landed. In the end, Alpha Flight, who went to investigate and found them, who had a quick tussle with their friends, who at the time thought the city was great, before Loki revealed himself and the mutants were able to unite to defeat him after learning that the powers, magic clothing, and eternal life granted came with a price. The destruction of magical beings like Alpha Flight member Snowbird. Oh no, Snowbird! Fortunately, Loki was foiled, but this was a pretty diabolical plot. Number 3. Bartered with Enchantress's hand. Not my hand! But also, this is very serious. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's very serious, this is terrible. Loki did this not once even, but twice. Both times Idun was not even consulted, and the second time around she was full on tricked by Loki. Idun was known as the keeper of golden apples. She is very important to the Asgardian people because of her being the only person who can pick the golden apples, which are what grant the Asgardians their eternal youth and vitality, making them immortal as well. So it's a really important job. The first time it was Loki who promised, but also managed to avoid Enchantress being married off, but this only resulted in greater trouble for Thor when it was revealed the mason he had bartered with was actually a frost giant in disguise. So he tricked him and then he kind of had to fight a frost giant. That's where Thor comes in. The second time, he once again promised her hand to a frost giant in order to save his own skin from starvation and from his own banishment. This time around, Thor once again had to save the day, but Idun was still imprisoned for a time and likely traumatized from the whole experience in the end. Number 2. Stole Sif's body. This has to be by far one of the worst things that Loki has done. And what's worse, he did it for the most petty of reasons. Like many of his antics, it was simply to piss off Thor. At first, Thor actually wondered why Loki had returned to life, resurrected in a female form, but Loki played it off as just like, oh, this is just some coincidence, I just happened to be reincarnated in a female body, don't worry about it. Later, however, we'd learn about the horror that Lady Loki really was. Loki in Sif's body having stolen her body, the body of his enemy, to parade around in and just use as he pleased. Ugh. This also greatly affected Lady Sif even after she had her body back. She remarked how even though she was supposed to be this strong and fearless warrior, she found herself trembling at the slightest unknown shadow, terrified that Loki was lurking around a corner waiting to return and claim her body as his own. Ugh, I don't like that. Number 1. Killed his younger self. Kid Loki was one of the best versions of Loki we'd ever got. And by best, I mean the most honest, the most true, the kindest, the most heroic. He was a trickster, but a seemingly innocent one, a nice one. Kid Loki was on a path of redemption. He was basically a hero, but not even Loki could let Loki redeem himself. Seeing that no one would ever see him as anything other than the god of lies, no matter how much good he did, King Loki took out revenge on everyone around him, eventually even killing his own more naive persona and self, Kid Loki. Or really, more younger Loki at this point. Basically, Kid Loki is like a younger version of King Loki. It's all Loki, but yeah, killed the nicest Loki. Sad.
Number 10, his origins. Of course, we have to start at the beginning. Ultimate Loki entered the chat in Ultimates 2, issue 1. He is the son of Odin and Farbadi. He was born basically as a peace settlement between Asgard and Jotunheim. So Loki, half-brother Thor, and Balder were the original Warriors 3 here. So Loki would battle these frost giants, they fought in the 1,000-year war, and finally the Asgardians were deemed the victors. So the three of them now entered this tournament with other Asgardian warriors, and that's where he was defeated by his brother Thor for the first time. Number 9, a message. So while the brothers were fighting, Loki was warning Thor at the same time. You know, the usual monologue while we're fighting. Now, as the battles begin, Loki strikes Thor, and Thor gets a little excited. He's like, oh, that's how we're gonna be, brother, let's do it. Whatever, you know, they sound like. I'm not man enough to do the He's like, okay, that's how it's gonna be, I see, let's do it. So while they're fighting, Loki begins to warn Thor of what's gonna come after their victories. He tells Thor that they're getting ready to enter very dangerous times, and Thor is confused. He's like, I'm sorry, I thought we just beat everybody. That's why we're celebrating, no? And that's the whole point of this. It's over, we won. Now Loki agrees, but in doing so, this victory, it ended a stalemate that existed for 1,000 years. Now during war, they know who they were. Now that it's over, now what? Who are these guys? What do they have to do now? Now everything changes. Balder comes in after beating those other guys, and he and Thor kept battling, both pretty much ignoring Loki and his warning. Classic. Thor pulls his hammer out to light the place up whilst presenting the victor of the battle, Balder. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It's really helpful for us on our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you for your support. Let's get right back to this video. Number 8, he killed Balder. Spoiler warning, let's do it now while we're at it. So the Warriors 3, they didn't last long after this, because when Loki went to go visit his mother, who was now a prisoner of Odin, she asked him for a favor. She asked Loki to bring her the Norn stones, which contains Odin's power, much like the hammer. So while Loki was stealing those stones, he had to do something pretty dark and terrible. He fired an arrow through the helmet of Heimdall, and yes, the helmet was on his head. So just like that, bam, it was one shot, perfect aim, he nailed it. His favorite bow too, might I add. So Loki also had to take out his other half-brother Balder with his favorite bow. He just loves the bow thing, it's crazy. And that's of course when he was banished from Asgard, which makes sense. He should have been banished a little sooner, but that's fine. Better late than never. So while he was talking to Balder, he made him use his gifts and tell Loki what the future holds. Now Balder responds with, okay, Asgard is in ruins, your mother is dead for her betrayal, and you, Loki, you believe in nothing and you are lost. All salt and no spirit. Burn, that's a roast. There is no tomorrow with his chaos. And then Loki asks what Balder sees in his future before releasing that fateful arrow. Number 7, Baron Zemo. In 1939, supervillain Baron Zemo rose to take over Asgard. Well, it wasn't actually Baron Zemo, it was the Lord of Mischief himself, which you probably could have guessed. He planned an attack on Asgard and his backup was quite intimidating. He had German soldiers and frost giants ready to fight all under his command. Now after a quick Heimdall cocktail, all of these soldiers and giants were just amped up. The Norn stones mixed with Heimdall's blood, yup, it just empowered them. And just as he told Thor, trouble is indeed on its way. Chaos ensued, but luckily Odin stepped in and banished Loki to one of the worst rooms ever. The room without doors. How do we get out? How do we get in? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So Loki apologizes before he disappears, and he says he's sorry. Sorry for nothing, that is. Oh, had him in the first half. You thought. Number 6, Ragnarok. So Loki was sent to the room without doors, but the gang wasn't out of the woods yet. We still have to deal with the giant army, duh. So Odin was then attacked by the leader of the frost giants, Mammon, and once Thor took care of that, he went to check in on his father, and as he was fading away, the world tree began to burn. And as Odin died, so did Asgard. So Thor was a little upset at this point, a little upset. So he went on a bit of a rampage, as he should. Now, what ended up happening here was because the Ultimate comic goes back and forth, now, back then, before returning to Asgard, Loki had left those Norn stones with a young soldier named Helmet, and also instructions on what to do with them. So he's not like, cool, is that a sapphire? What is this gem? What are these gems? So cut to 60 years later, Thor is on Earth, Helmet opens this portal to the room without doors, and Loki is now free. Thing is, Loki was still a god when he went in. He hasn't gone anywhere, whereas Thor and Balder were reborn as mortal men. So now we got a problem. Number 5, Loki's return. So the god of mischief is back again, and he spent some time under house arrest. And following the failed Chitauri invasion, Loki teamed up with the Liberators in an attempt to take down the Ultimates, which sounds bad enough, but then he also had plans to start World War III. Because, you know, why not? In Ultimates issue 2, Loki used his reality-changing abilities and created the identity of Gunnar Goldman, member of the Norwegian Super Soldier program, and he used Thor's past life as Thorleif in order to make Thor seem like he's going insane. And it worked. Now, he wasn't quite done there, however. See, Loki had also tried to frame Captain America for what happened to Clint's family. He was blending in as a leader, not using his powers, or else Odin would be able to find him, but I'll get into that a little later on. Now, thankfully, the Liberators weren't able to defeat the Ultimates, but Loki still wanted to try after failing this many times. So he attacked the Ultimates again, but the Scarlet Witch and her probability powers summoned Thor, so that didn't happen. Number 4, banished again. Okay, so Thor returns with the hammer this time. Loki is totally screwed, and Thor decides that it's probably best to finish the trickster off. But with Loki and his powers, it's evidently not an easy task, especially when Loki summons an army of Asgardian monsters. It's heated, and then Odin came down to bring the pain himself. Odin too sent some Guardian warriors and removed most of Loki's powers. So those hammer hits from Thor are going to start to leave a mark. So he reverted back to his old ways, and he tried to talk himself out of these situations. So he ranted about how he was jealous of Thor, how he wanted to see him finally go down. He even took a jab at us humans. For some reason, he's like, look at these fools. They believed all these illusions. Look how stupid they are. They bought it. Meanwhile, I'm like, that's nice. That's really nice. So Thor does a trick of his own and sends Loki right back to Asgard to atone for his sins. But guess what? Number 3, he got out again. Get out of town. Loki? No way. How? Loki somehow got free from Odin and tried to take on Thor yet again, but this time with trolls as backup. He wanted to annoy Thor to a point where he would just go nuts, and then Thor would be the one to lose control and destroy Earth. Like I would do to my older brother all the time. I would bug him, then he'd swear, then I'd tell on him for swearing, and then he'd get grounded. Easy, right? You're welcome. Thing is, Loki ended up taking out Valkyrie, Thor's girlfriend, which never happened in our family, thank God. But this got heated, right? Where Hela had to get involved now. Hela brought Valkyrie back to life, this time as a real Valkyrie, and then she killed Loki. See ya, pal. He went straight to the underworld, straight to hell. But even there, he planned for yet another escape. You gotta respect the hustle, he doesn't quit. Number 2, powers and weaknesses. So we're gonna see many tricks from Loki in this Disney show, and in the Ultimates alone, Loki's abilities are quite impressive. To see a handful of these would just spoil us. He can shuffle space and time, as I mentioned before, but there's a lot to that. So any attacks against Loki are fixable because he can just alter his own godly strength to resist said injuries. He can make you talk to a person that's not even there, make you look absolutely insane, and with multiple copies of Loki, not only will you get a headache from all the monologues, but he's equally as strong as Thor with those numbers. His weaknesses come from his home life, of course. Odin can control quite a bit of this chaos. So if Loki uses all of his power, full capacity, Odin will be able to find him. It's like yelling really loud. They're like, why is he yelling? Oh, it's Loki. Get over here. During Ultimates 2, Thor mentions that Loki's powers had weakened, and it was unclear why at that point. But later on, comments from Loki implied that Odin was the reason behind this all along. And finally, number 1, his death. It's no surprise Loki escaped from hell afterwards when Asgard came to Earth, and during the attack of the Children of Tomorrow, Loki finally met his fate while battling alongside other Asgardians. But not Thor. See, Thor is now in Valhalla at this point. He got released, but he had to have a child with Hela first, so his hands were full. So Thor was able to see Loki's ghost as well as other Asgardians and his nephew, Modi, and you can find the last of Ultimate Loki in Ultimates Volume 2, Issue 2. Number 10, Kid Loki. One of the versions of Loki that we're rumored to get in the Disney Plus original is Kid Loki. Jack Veal's name has been whispered through the winds, and honestly, I could see it. I mean, look at him. He looks very Tom Hiddleston-y. Now in the comics, Kid Loki too was also a nuisance. Kid Loki came around in Thor issue 617. Now after adult Loki sacrificed himself for Asgard, he was sent with the Dark Avengers from Norman Osborn, and he had a change of heart in regards to, well, Asgard's fate. He returned to Earth looking better than ever, just with a few memories from his previous life. A little young Tot with a few memories. It's cool. Even when he's commanding the Dark Avengers and changes sides, he always has a backup plan. So that's what makes this character so compelling. This guy died 3 times in the MCU, and he's probably gonna die 4 times more. Maybe even 5 times. I don't know. I'm gonna bet 3 times. He's gonna die 3 times in the show. I could see them killing him once an episode, kind of like South Park Kenny style, you know? Now, Kid Loki's cool because he travels with a companion, a trusty magpie named number 9, the Devil. Okay, this first one isn't exactly shocking. One of the many versions of Loki, and one of the earliest, was in Venus issue 6, back in the late 40s, back in the 1940s. That's so old. See, Loki at this time was banished from Olympus to the Olympian underworld of Hades by Zeus. It's unclear what exactly he did, but considering the fact that he's referred to as Satan, it could be literally anything. I mean, insert bad thing here, you know? But he had a son, appropriately named Son of Satan. Okay, better than Kyle, I don't know. Is it? No. The two of them were punks. They were obsessed with being romantically involved with Venus. I mean, sure, she's the goddess of love and all, but the both of you want her? It's kind of weird. It's gross. It's a gross dynamic. What an awkward drive that must be. Loki's son disguised himself. He went to the offices of Beauty Magazine where Venus worked, and then he's like, "Hi, I'm Mr. Saturn." Like, pick a new name, first of all, way too close. They're like, "Satan?" He's like, "No, it's Saturn." Damn, that was close. Now, his son was insane. He would cause these natural disasters on Earth, because, you know, love. So Venus finally agreed to be with him, and then when he stopped fighting, Venus hucked a fireball at him and made him orbit the planet for all of eternity. So Devil or Kid Devil, whatever version you're getting, doesn't matter. Loki always wants the attention. Number 8, Ickle, which is Loki backwards, if you didn't catch that already. So in Journey into Mystery issue 622, Kid Loki needed to figure out why he was reborn, right? All these memories have now vanished, so what's going on? So he transported himself to a hidden chamber where he met a spirit, the ghost of Christmas past. Nay, he met the spirit of himself from the past. So he caught Kid Loki up and explained why he wanted this fresh start, a free future. And Kid Loki was like, "Hold up, let me help you out here. How about you stop the whole being a spirit thing and I'll just turn you into a magpie." So now he's a magpie. Loki is now a magpie. Okay. Kid Loki now has a pretty exciting partner. A cute partner too, might I add. Little red eyes. How lovely. Number 7, Gunnar Goldman. Loki is a master of tricks. He can turn himself into a snake, make himself look like Steve Rogers, but when he takes the disguise of Norwegian super soldier Gunnar Goldman in the Ultimates, he makes Thor look like he's losing his mind. He makes everybody think that Thor is just a super soldier gone rogue, who has this magic belt that gives him Thor's powers. Thing is, this belt has been referenced in the MCU. Happy lists it off when he's packing up for moving day in Spider-Man Homecoming. So the Ultimates of course believe Gunnar, and they're just about to attack Thor, but alas, the day is saved and Loki's schemes come to an end. For now. Number 6, Sleipnir. There have been a few origins for Sleipnir, and for this list we're gonna go with the more fun one. Also the more kind of gross one. So Odin tasked Loki to handle this situation, okay? So the situation was this dude came along and offered to fix Asgard's wall, but the terms were shady. See, if he completed the wall within 6 months, he would be awarded the moon, the sun, and Freya. The 3 things we all want in life. So they waited until the last brick, and then Loki turned into this. He turned into a beautiful white mare and lured the man's horse away. Because see, the man turned out to be, well, not a man at all. He was rather a frost giant in disguise. So after the deal was made, Odin's like, "Oh, did we just shake on that?" So Loki led his horse away, disguised also as a horse, while Thor handled the big guns himself. Now, if you thought that was a cool trick, let me tell you, Loki is so committed that he straight up gave birth after this to Sleipnir later on. Number 5, Scarlet Witch. This would mess things up a lot if Loki decided to do this. He's posed as an Avenger in the past a couple times now. He's taken on the form of Captain America, briefly, but in Mighty Avengers 21, Dark Reign, Henry Pym is put in charge to lead this new team. Now at this point, S.H.I.E.L.D. has fallen and Norman was running the Dark Avengers, so Scarlet Witch was calling the shots. But it's a list of alternate Lokis, and I just did this, so you're probably onto something. Loki's idea was to pose as the Maximoff twin to go against Osborn's team, but there was another twin that was onto something as well. Wanda's son Wiccan cast a spell that exposed Loki. So smart. Imagine if Wanda in the MCU is like, "Oh, Westview? That was Loki." Number 4, King Loki. Coming from the 2004 Loki miniseries, readers got to see Loki in a spot that he's been trying to be in for a very long time. The throne. Now we saw him take the throne at the end of Thor the Dark World, then the next time we saw him in Ragnarok he was disguised as Odin, eating grapes, watching some theater, while the realm spun into chaos. Now in the story he does more than home aloning it. See, King Loki defeats Thor in the story, and he has Asgard in his grasp. Now, if you're looking to see an entirely new take on the character, check out these 4 issues coming from the mind of Rob Roddy with pencils by Sad Ribic. Now, I have no doubt we're going to see Loki's ruling in this show, so you might want to freshen up as well. Number 3, 616 Loki. Of course, one of the earliest versions of the character came to us from Stan Lee. It was introduced to readers in Journey into Mystery issue 85. Before Loki ends up getting up to anything crazy or godlike in the comics, he already was condemned by the gods, and his punishment was actually pretty brutal. He was stuck in a tree, not like up in a tree, like inside of a tree. He's to remain there until somebody sheds a tear for him. Now, he's been in there ages, so at this point nobody really gives a damn. And then over time he begins to finally understand how to control the tree. Not like Harry Potter style, but you know, he can move a branch or two. So when Heimdall is passing by, he commands the tree to shed a leaf, and the timing was just so perfect. The leaf drifted right into his eye, boink, and then voila, we have now a shedded tear that was caused because of Loki, technically. And his first plan of attack was to seek revenge against the one responsible for his hashtag tree time, Thor. And number 2, Lady Loki. Okay, so Lady Loki is practically confirmed for the Loki show. In a Vanity Fair interview, Loki's head writer Michael Waldron hinted that some Loki love stories are in the first season. And I know they say opposites attract, but Loki and Lady Loki sounds too good to pass up. She came around in Marvel Comics originally during Avengers Disassembled, when Loki stole a body that was intended for Lady Sif. So perhaps, and I know this is a reach, perhaps they can explain her absence in the MCU by maybe introducing this Lady Loki and then using that story in some way, shape, or form. It could also set up some interesting timeline changes with Thor, Love, and Thunder. Or it could be just like 2014's Loki's Agent of Asgard, where Loki just disguises himself as a woman. But I feel like Sophia DiMartino will be her own version of the character. I'm honestly looking forward to anything we get. I'm looking forward to all these new characters and relationships that are coming with this show. All these alternate timeline stuff is fine, but Owen Wilson, Lady Loki, like yes. All the yes. And finally, number 1, 2012 Loki. Remember when the world was supposed to end in 2012? Well, that was the case for the MCU as well. Perhaps one of the worst versions of Loki is the main Loki we're getting for this TV show. When he failed to take over the world in 2012's Avengers, he got another chance thanks to, well, the Avengers. They decided a time heist in New York was the best way to bring back half the population, and while it worked, sure, for the most part, give or take a few casualties, the team was forced to run the clock back even more in history after they lost the Tesseract. Now, in that version, Loki grabbed it and vanished. Now, after this long, we get to now find out just where he went, and this is an interesting time for the trickster because he sacrificed his life at the beginning of Infinity War to try and save the day. But he promised to Thor right before he got the old Loki chokey, he promised to Thor that the sun would shine on them again someday. So could this show be that someday? Could this be the glimpse of hope? Now, in trailers and clips, it looks like one of these episodes will feature a what if type scenario. We see Loki standing in front of New York City, only it looks much worse, and the Avengers Tower is out of commission. It's practically fallen to the ground. So I'm hoping we're gonna get to see an evil 2012 Loki again. This is gonna be really dark. Whatever happens in that episode doesn't look good at all. Whatever happened here and whatever timeline could point to Loki finally being the king of Asgard. Possibly. What do you guys think?